Good afternoon. My name's Keith Cameron, and Enid's been bugging me for 6 months or so to give a little chat. Our family's a little unique, and I'm going to start with my father in the dirty 30s, when him and his brother and a couple other farm boys rode the rails out in, I think it was 35, and they ended up on southern Vancouver Island working in the logging industry. And they started at Souk, and believe it or not, they logged in Brentwood and Deep Cove area, North Saanich, and Mill Bay, I guess where the logs were closer to the water and they could drop them in because there was no logging roads or logging trucks or anything. And anyhow, in that time, he met my mother, who her family's an old Victorian family, and she was teaching out in Brentwood and living at her mother's place in Victoria. And one thing led to another, and they got married in 1939. And then I came along in 1940, but prior to me being born, my father and his brother joined the Air Force, and because the war was going then, and they were both ended up as navigators on Lancaster bombers. My uncle was shot down in the North Sea out of Scotland, I think it was. They never did find him. My dad's aircraft was shot down and he got hurt pretty bad. So they sent him back to Canada to instruct navigation on, I guess, Lancaster and what other bombers they had. So consequently, me and my mother lived with my grandmother in Victoria. And I remember my dad was home twice during the war, and it seemed shortly after he left that damn Stork would bring me a baby brother. And he never did bring me a baby sister. So anyhow, when the war was over, we got out, and I don't know how it happened, but we owned the old Elk Lake Auto Court for 1 year. I don't know if anyone remembers the Elk Lake Auto Court. Yeah. I used to pump the gas up in the thing there, and I think Cunningham's, wasn't their garage across the street from us? Yeah, and the Toby jug and all that stuff. And I'll never forget when we were living at the Elk Lake Auto Court, there was a bunch of Canadian Army war prisoners came back from, I guess, Japanese prisoner of war camps. And I remember the poor guys sitting down on the docks at Elk Lake, and the folks that were with them told us not to go near them. That'd be Gary Cunningham and me and whoever else, because these fellows were in such bad shape. Anyhow, I guess he sold the auto court after a year. He figured it wasn't for him. And my grandmother had a cabin at Prospect Lake. So we moved there, and in the meantime, my father had bought 4 acres off of Mr. Loret's nursery at Wilkinson and Miller Avenue. And he bought, I think it was an army hut, and had it moved there. And then him and another guy stripped it and put in the bedrooms and all that stuff. And for the year he was doing that, I went to Prospect Lake School, grade 1. And then I guess he finished the house, and we moved to Wilkinson Road, and I started at Royal Oak, the old school, in grade 2, and I went there till grade 6. There's a few people here that I went to school with, but I won't mention names because of age. And then we all moved over to the beautiful brand new Royal Oak High School in grade 7. We moved across the street. And it was just a gorgeous school. In the meantime, my father sold 2 acres of his property to Ian Fowler's parents, Jock and I forget his mother's name. And Mr. Fowler built the greenhouses on there and raised his tomatoes. And this was right at Miller and Wilkinson Road. Some of our neighbors were the Williamses, Pete, and I don't know if you know them, Naomi, Eldridge. And then the Scott girls lived right beside us. And then just down the hill about a block away was this cute little redhead that used to be shooting around. Again, I won't mention any names, but I think she worked at Lorette's telephone exchange. Didn't you, Enid? I know the Scott girls did. Did you babysit for us? Okay, the Scott girls babysat for us, yes. Yeah. So everything was going great then, and we had a wonderful life there. I was in Cubs, just down the hill across from McDonald's old house. Bob Slater, the fireman, he was our Cub leader. And then we went to Scouts, and Mr. Goddard, Peter's dad, was our Scout leader. I played hockey in Victoria. We square danced at Royal Oak. I forget what nights a week it was. Fished in Colquitt's Creek, again could catch fish. And then come along in '54, my dad inherited his grain farm in southwestern Manitoba. And it was a 1.5 sections, strictly grain, no cattle. And it was 3 miles long and 1/2 mile wide. So I went from the beautiful Royal Oak area to the old Bald Prairie. We had to walk a mile to school, and it was a one-room school, grade 1 to grade 10, one teacher. And I think at one time there was 19 students, and then it went downhill. They had a livery barn there, and people actually rode their horses to school and back. Now, what a cultural shock for me after leaving here. So I was out of the picture here, and then I came back in 1960. I just had enough out there and came back to Victoria. And got married here, and I got involved in the transportation industry, mainly trucking. And when I was 21, which would be 1961, we had a contract with the dew lines. I remember, if you remember those radar stations all across, and we would haul the military people out of Vandenberg Air Force Base in California by Santa Barbara to all the radar bases. The people could take their personal effects. And this was the start of the racial problems in the States, and it was here's this 21-year-old farm guy down there and seeing these riots, and it was just terrible. Anyhow, I quit driving truck and I got into working in different offices and that, and got married. And when I was married, we moved worse than the military about every 2 years. I've lived in Victoria, Duncan, Campbell River, Port Hardy, Prince George, Richmond, Calgary, and then back to Victoria. And ironically enough, when I got back here, I lived in Sydney. My kids went to school in Sydney. And then in 1989, we bought a house, brand new house at Lorette's Ballpark, 2 blocks from where I started out with. So I've done the whole circle. We still live up there. When I was living here, I remember when I was 10 years old, my first job, myself and Lou Burden got a job with Mr. Lorette's. And he had about a 10-acre field, and it was all full of roses. And this was in, I guess, July or August. And our job was to cut the heads off the roses so the workers could come along and they'd graft them and crossbreed the roses somehow. So we'd be out there in the hot sun all day, and Mr. Lorette's kept his eye on us, and you couldn't sit down, you had to bend over and cut these heads off these darn roses and that. Anyhow, since we've been back in the area, I've got involved with you guys. My wife's getting very involved with the church next door, and there's some of these gals here that we see golfing once a week, and it's very nice to be back. And basically that's me in a nutshell. I don't know if anyone has any questions or anything. Yes?
Could you give us, please, the name of your mother, the name of your grandmother where you lived, and the name of your wife?
Oh, yeah. My grandmother was Jenny Morey, M-O-R-R-Y, and they were Newfies, and they came around the Horn to Victoria. And there were a whole bunch of these people. They were all good Catholics. And my grandfather and his brother were contractors. And they built the north wing of the Empress and the breakwater. Another part of the family is the Griffiths from Griffiths Plumbing and Heating. Another part is Mike O'Connor, the lawyer. I don't know if you know him. My grandmother's name was Catherine, and when she was teaching, now this is in the 30s, the only job she could get was out at Brentwood, and she used to drive from her mother's place. They lived on Stanley Avenue at the Oak Bay Junction there, and I remember her telling me that they used to pick up the Chew kids, she would. They'd be going, I guess, to Prospect Lake School. I don't know where they'd be going to school. But they'd be walking up the road, Johnny and them, and she'd give them a ride if she saw them. And then my mother, Catherine, her mother had this cottage at Prospect Lake, and like I said, that's where we lived, and they owned it. Her brothers sold it, I don't know when it was, probably the mid-'60s to late '60s, that they sold the place at Prospect Lake. And my uncle, he bought a lodge right next to Yellow Point up at Nanaimo called Mermaid Cove. So, but I must say, we had such a good life here in those days. We used to supper with the McDonald's back and forth with our parents were friends, and you know, you could ride your bikes up to go swimming at the lakes, and the fishing and the whole social life, and then to go back to this town of 250 people where you had to walk a mile to school and a mile back.
What was the name of the town?
Waskada, Waskada.
Yeah.
It was 5 miles from the North Dakota border and 30 miles from the Saskatchewan border. All gravel roads in those days. We had the telephone system. One ring was yours, and a long and a short would be ours, and everyone would listen. It was a very culture shock for me. So. Pardon me? Oh, it was strictly grain, and we grew fall rye, wheat, barley for malting. They called it malting barley, and they sold that to the breweries. And then flax, we grew flax seed, and
Did he know what he was getting himself into?
oh yeah, he was raised there, and he inherited it when his dad died. Yeah.
Did he stay there?
Pardon me?
Did he stay there, your dad?
Yeah, they retired there. At the end, they used to spend, when I was living in Sydney, Mom and Dad would come out and spend the winter there in that motel by the ocean there. I forget the name of it now, but yeah, and then they both passed away. Yeah.
How long did you live in Saskatchewan?
Me?
Yeah.
See, about 12 years.
Oh, it was enough winter, eh?
Wind, and being a grain farmer, there was nothing to do in the winter because we didn't have cattle, we didn't have pigs or none of that stuff. So did a little curling. Yes.
Was your wife a local girl? Because you said you got married then.
Which wife?
Sorry, I didn't mean to bring him out any.
Well, my first wife was from Duncan, and my second wife is from Aldergrove. And she was raised on a dairy farm in Aldergrove, yeah. So, yes, ma'am, were you going to ask me something?
I've forgotten your brother's names, Keith, but could you give us an update on your family?
Well, the guy 18 months younger than me, that was the first leave. He lives in Edmonton now.
What's his name? I've forgotten.
David.
David.
And he went to University of Manitoba and was a civil engineer. And he spent half his life with Labatt's brewery, building breweries and bottling plants around the world. And then he went with McCain Foods and built plants and troubleshot for them in all their places around the world. And him and his wife live in Edmonton. Why, I don't know. And then Graham, he was the second leave. He lives in White Rock. And he was a very successful businessman. And I keep on the good side of him because he has a very nice condo in Maui. And then after we got back here, it would be in 1950, I had another brother, and he did his career in the RCMP, and he's now retired in Kamloops.
What was his name? What's his name?
Except the baby brother didn't, no, but the other guys, grade 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, yeah.
What's the youngest one's name?
Pardon me?
What's the youngest one's name?
Bruce. He's 67 now. So, yeah, so we did a lot of traveling around, but we kept coming back to the Royal Oak area. And
On Wilkinson Road, where was your place? On the Miller side or the other side?
the other side,
And it's still kind of wide open there.
yeah, it is. The old army hut's still there. I don't know who owns it. All of the Fowler's greenhouses are all gone. And Williams, where their farm was, I think it's, what do they call it, subsidized housing or something in there, at the end of Miller Avenue. Yeah,
Townhouses or.
yeah.
whatever.
And then, what's that road across from your farm, Enid? Lindsay? Yeah, there used to be, right down by the shopping mall, there used to be a hazelnut farm there. Do you remember that? They grew hazelnuts, and the guy that owned it, I don't know who he was, but I know he'd let Lou Burden and I go in there after they'd picked the crop, and we'd fill up bags like this and take them home with hazelnuts off the ground. It's quite interesting. And then we lived very close to the mental institution, and it was pretty, I don't know how to say it. The patients there were really bad people. And we'd go up behind the Cuthberts and that in the fields where they'd be working and talk to the guards. Guards would be standing there with shotguns, and these killers and everything else running around working in their fields never bothered us. We had no qualms going out at night, did we, in the dark? And they used to blow a whistle. Was that at 6 o'clock? They blew the whistle. Do you remember that?
The sirens going off every once in a
Yeah, when they had an escape. But they had a steam whistle, and I know that was our notice to get home because supper was ready. Yeah, and you could hear it all through the valley there. Yeah. So, any other questions? Yes, sir.
Would you mind expanding a little bit on your trucking and your business out of the United States and up to the Dew Line? How did that work?
Yeah, that was, okay, now first of all, you got to realize you had to be 21 to drive truck in the States. And the company I work for, United Van Lines, they signed a contract that I wouldn't go west or east of the Mississippi, and I'd stay in the 4 western provinces in the Yukon. And so here's this 21-year-old kid off the prairies. And I remember going down, I was in Monterey, California, and there was a big U.S. Marine base there. And it was at night, and there was such a fight going on with these military guys, blacks and whites, that the police just shut the road down, and you couldn't go anywhere, just let them fight till they dropped, I guess. Another time I was going through Portland, this is before I-5, again in the evening, and there was this young black couple standing on the corner, and she was crying her heart out, and there was these white guys in a car just screaming at them, just like banshees. So I opened my door, get in. So, and I drove the kids a couple of blocks away or something, let them out. Yeah. Another time I was in a restaurant, and there was another truck parked out front like mine. He was the driver, but he was out of, I think, New Orleans, but he was black. I sat with him, you always do with people, and I wasn't getting served. And finally he says to me, boy, if you all want to get something to eat, you got to go sit over there. I didn't know any of this stuff coming from a little hick farm town. Yeah. Anything else?
Could you tell us what you and Lou Burton got up
No. I'll tell you one story. Do you folks know where the Cuthbert farm was? On the hill? Well, my youngest brother, I'd be 10 then, Lou would be 12, and he was born in August, and this was when snow had fallen. And we had him out on a sleigh with a cardboard box sitting on it, and he's in his little snowsuit. And we were sliding up and down the hill from Mr. and Mrs. Burden's down to Lindsay Avenue and back. Well, then we decided we'd get Lou's 2 black Labradors and hook them to the sleigh and put the baby in the middle, you see, in this box. Well, of course, the old dogs, the faster the sleigh went, the faster they went. And then they decided they're going to turn left up Lindsay Avenue. Well, you know what happened to the sleigh and the baby in the box. And Lou and I are just petrified. We're up, I guess, just by the edge of your place in Burden's. And of course, the baby starts howling, and my mother could hear it from her house, which was, I guess, a block and a half away. And of course, she didn't know what happened to the kid. We're dusting them off and trying to get him home, shut him up. That's one story. So,
We used to get so excited just to see a car on Wilkinson Road.
oh yeah,
Here comes a car.
that's right. Another story I'll tell. Me and my immediate younger brother, we were going to Scouts, and those days you walked, and there was no street lights or hardly any. So we'd walk up to West Saanich and then down to the Scout Hall. We had our uniform on, short pants and all that stuff. And the head honcho from the South Island Scout group was coming out to the Scout Hall. Well, one of the codes of a Scout is you never hitchhike. So my brother and I, guess who picked us up? We spent the evening down here, I don't know, in a corner or something. We never hitchhiked in our uniforms after that. And then we used to go up to your dad's place, Peter, and you had all them trails and stuff through the back. Yeah, I used to have a lot of fun. And then, like, to go from that to a farm 3 miles long and half a mile wide, you know, it was nothing. Any other questions? These ladies I used to square dance with, do you still square dance? I don't.
Where did you square dance?
The old Royal Oak Community Hall, wasn't it? Yeah. 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 And then the municipal office was next door, and the Saanich police were in the basement. Yeah.
Victoria's a small world when you think that Bonnie and Jerry and myself and Keith
Yeah.
have reunited at Mount Golf Course.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we all meet there and golf.
That's right. Every Wednesday. You guys do, isn't it? Wednesdays? Yeah, we're Monday, Wednesday, Friday, our group.
They golf 3 times.
Yeah, we used to belong to Royal Oak, so that's another story.
With Bruce Corbett and
Yeah,
who else is it, Bonnie? John Tyler. John Tyler. And my other friends that golf with us go, how did you grow up where there were only 50 children and you seem to know everybody on the golf course?
then another hookup you and I got, Marilyn, is your friends in Trevino and our friends in Trevino. Yeah,
Great.
yeah,
Our old school friends.
yeah, yeah. And we used to cut through your place to go to Panama Flats and all that stuff. No one cared in those days, you know. Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
I found this information. It was on the wall in the hall itself. And this is, and it's entitled A Tribute to Community Cooperation. The Royal Oak Community Hall is not only a reminder of the Women's Institute with which the building has a lengthy association, but of the special part the building has played in the development of this Saanich community. The name Royal Oak was derived from a large oak tree which stood adjacent to the first Royal Oak Inn belonging to pioneer settler Richard Cheeseman in 1862. This was across the road from the community hall. It was in the spring of 1910 that the Women's Institute was started, with meetings taking place in members' homes. In September, Mrs. A. Richards was elected president and Mrs. Carmichael became secretary-treasurer. The Carmichaels were among the first permanent settlers in Cordova Bay, where there were only half a dozen homes at the turn of the century. J.R. Carmichael was the assessor of Saanich municipality from the start in 1906 until 1915. And as is often usual, streets and roads bear the names of the local lands and their landowners and their families. Walima Avenue is a case in point. I've never found Walima Avenue. I was beginning to wonder if it still exists. The name is comprised of the first letters of Carmichael children, Wally, Esther, and Mary. Esther married William Quick, who operated the first Jersey cow farm in Saanich. His varied interests led him to form the Saanich and Suburban Baseball League. He built a home on a prominent ridge on Wilkinson Road. In 1911, it is still in good shape. Both he and his wife were very active in community affairs, and their son Fred was reeve of Saanich, and during this term was responsible for the construction of East Saanich Road. The newly formed Royal Oak Women's Institute had little difficulty enlisting the efforts of Messrs. Quick, Carmichael, and others to build a community hall in 1911. The name was that the same year that the principal hall was built immediately in the south and west Saanich Road. The wood frame building, it's very poor print this, I photographed it off the wall, it's very hard to read it, was well proportioned, and the prominent entrance was flanked by matching. I have a copy of the photograph that was up there. I'll put that on the table. You can look at that too. That's how it was originally looked. Right. The wood frame building was well proportioned, and the prominent entrance was flanked by matching projections, each with minor hip type of gables. The front facade was provided with 4 windows, the upper ones sporting arched headers. A series of decorative roof brackets runs under all the eaves, and the exterior of the building is finished with clapboard siding with the upper part shingled. With many Royal Oak families donating their time and money to the project, it is no wonder that the community hall has for years been a focal point of the community through numerous meetings, social and sports events. In October 1928, the trustees of the hall sold the building and land to the Institute. The building received heritage designation in 1979, thereby ensuring that the external appearance will remain the same, and it continues to serve as a reminder of the community working together and sharing its fortune, as well as setbacks, both in peacetime and wartime. This article was written by Geoffrey Castle, who was the municipal archivist for the Corporation of the District of Saanich, and appeared in the Times Colonist paper. So what I've added to that was, thank you for inviting a member of Royal Oak's Women's Institute to come to this meeting. When I made inquiries about the story behind our hall, I was told that all the information was on the wall of the upstairs room. It took a while to get access to it, but eventually I managed, and this is what I found. It occurred to me, what I read to you, it occurred to me that everyone might not know what the Women's Institute stands for and how it was founded. It is an organisation for rural women founded in 1897 in Stony Creek, Ontario, by Adelaide Hoodless. Its purpose was primarily educational, not schooling, but homemaking, child rearing, and general improvement in living. She felt that all the farmers had a get-together, but there was nothing for the wives. And so that's why she felt this was very important to have something for the wives to get together and so on, and to help them with telling them about, they could exchange recipes and looking after their children. Daughters of well-educated and wealthier families had more advantages than the less privileged, and this was the reason for starting the Women's Institute movement and similar organisations around the world. Mrs. Alfred Watt took the WI from BC to England and went on to found the Associated Countrywomen of the World, which is the worldwide, which includes all countries of the world, but they have different names. In the US, it's called Countrywomen, I think they're called. They have different names. They're not just called Women's Institute. Queen Mary became interested and organised a WI at her Sandringham home. You see, and once she did it, then everybody thought, right, the Queen, good enough for the Queen, good enough for us. Women of all ranks and religions are equal, so there was a lot to overcome when the lady of the manor met the wife of the under-gardener on equal terms. Nowadays, Royal Oak WI has a care of the hall, which means we raise money to keep it in good shape. We also contribute to the care of abused women through our support of Margaret Lawrence House and Women's Transition House, and we support the Queen Alexandra Foundation, donate books to local school, Royal Oak School, and give scholarships to a project at Halliburton Farms, and we currently have 20 members. The little leaflets I bought list South Vancouver Island and Women's Institute. This is just South Vancouver Island. Okay, this is just South Vancouver Island, and there are Cedar, Cobble Hill, Colwood, Langford, Pender, Royal Oak, Salt Springs, Shirley, and Sominos. So you can see there are plenty, and we get together. We have a South Vancouver Island every quarter. It's coming up in about 2 weeks' time, and we do what we do. Supporting Queen Alexandra Foundation and BC Children's Hospital financially and vocally when needed, make quilts for transition houses, pack shoe boxes for Operation Christmas Child, bursaries given to students entering university or colleges to further their education, support local 4-H clubs with financial donations, provincial resolutions such as opposing things, that are not allowed. So, Into the North project, providing necessities such as clothing, bedding and towels to communities in the territories, and raising money for special projects. So we have a lot of things that we do. We support the families at Transition House, for instance, or Margaret Lawrence House, which is sort of apartments for women who've have been abused and have left their husbands and brought their children. And we give them gifts every beginning of the school year. We give them school supplies. We give them a big Christmas collection of gifts, and also we give them food cards for the different stores. And and we make things for, I think that the hospital will say, oh, we need some more bibs, and so we have a sewing session and people make bibs for the children in the Queen Alexandra Hospital and so forth. And so there's always things to do. We shrank down to quite a only about 5 or 6 members a few years ago, and then suddenly there was an influx from all the women who go to the square dancing clubs. Every evening, as you know, I'm sure, the hall is rented out for that. It's rented out for an exercise group in the daytime, and other people can use it. We can use it. If we need to have something, a big place, we need it, we can use it for ourselves. And but of course it takes a lot of money to upkeep that hall, because it has to be kept, up to snuff, seeing as it's a heritage place. We can't neglect it at all. So we spend a lot of money keeping it good. We're just having the men's toilets redone right at the moment, and so on. But we've got a lot of the husbands do a lot of the things, as you can imagine, and so we managed to keep it going. But everybody's very keen. We have our meetings second Wednesday of the month, 1 o'clock, and we usually have a speaker. I was just saying that the speaker next week is a woman who's going to talk about pelvic floor. And the last meeting I went to, we had somebody who was talking about essential oils, which is it sounded all very nice and pretty, and she was a nurse. She said, I'm not making any money out of this, but she was talking about buying these essential oils, so on, which are a cure-all, apparently. So, anyway, I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
What would you say is your chief fundraiser? Where do you get most of your money?
Well, we get, I think, from renting out the hall in the evenings. Yeah. Yes, that's a special section. Yes, so we have sort of women whose special interest is to do various things, and that's one of them. I think there are 2 people involved in the lettings, and they have, we just had to put all the rents up because, of course, electricity is costing more and so on, and we've had to be very careful about the telephone because people were using the telephone without paying, and you have to pay extra if you use the kitchen, and the kitchen has to be upgraded because now, of course, you have to have a double sink now if you're serving the public, which would, and you're supposed to, I think they really like you to have a dishwasher, or we don't have a dishwasher. So it's a bit complicated. So you can't really open the door and let the public come in. It has to be people who are part of groups, because we don't have those things. But,
Your donations that you get, are they new donations, or do you take used clothing and shoes like you were talking
no,
about?
we don't. No,
all
it's
new?
new.
It's all
Yeah.
new?
Yes, we donate money, and then somebody goes out and does the shopping and said, okay, this family's got a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old and so on, so and they need new pajamas and so on, Things like that is what happens. But I know I was turning out my basement and I found I've got a whole lot of young children's toys, and as I don't have any more young children visiting me anymore, I thought, right, take them to Women's Transition House. So I took this whole box and got rid of them all. I was very glad to get rid of them, but I'm sure they would be glad to get them too. So, but we also collect toiletries. When people have been away, you always collect these, soaps and things and so on. We always collect those, and those go to Women's Transition House to give to women who have come without anything. So,
Sounds
yeah.
wonderful.
So,
the work you're doing.
so well, it's very interesting. My aunt in New York was part of the umbrella organisation, Associated Country Women of the World, and she got my mother involved into this in London. This is where I come from, and my mother went to a couple of the all world meetings, but and I had another aunt who was very involved too in the WI where she lived, and they used to serve teas in the cathedral, which was in the town where they lived. That was what they did to get money. So, anyway, people have to think up things to do.
Yes.
Don't you? Anyway, so, all right.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Yes, has anybody had anybody who's a member of the WI?
Few have already mentioned they have relatives. Did you both say?
My mom was, well, we moved here in 47 from the middle of downtown Saskatoon. So my mother thought she had gone to the end of the earth.
Yes.
Royal Oak, and the Women's Institute was just saved her life. It was just a wonderful connection.
Yes.
And she was there with Tilly Quick.
Yes.
Okay.
And the
right.
Ingrams, and the Hools,
Yeah.
and just wonderful, wonderful people.
Yeah.
And Bonnie and I had lots of fun. They used to have dances there and all sorts of fun
Yeah.
things.
Because that name Quick remains now, doesn't it? Quick's Bottom, yes. You know, and you always think people laugh at it, but it's, yeah.
My grandmother and mother both were members of the Royal Oak Institute.
Oh, good.
My first wedding reception was there, and my mom and dad's wedding reception was
Oh, wonderful.
there. And my grandparents' 50th anniversary reception was there.
Oh, wonderful. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I was saying to somebody just now, one of the things we rented out to children's dance classes, but we had to put a stop to the tap dancing because they were wrecking the floor.
My sister took tap dancing down there.
Yes.
So Daryl and I were talking about the teen dances a little while ago. And
Oh, yes, yes.
I was coming home from one of those dances, and it might have been Halloween, but around midnight or so, and I think it was about the only attempt that's ever been made of my life. Walking along not far from Heather's house, and I could have gone on the Pipeline Road, but it was just too dark. So I walked on the West Saanich Road, and there's so few cars around, you'd hear them coming for a long way away.
Yeah.
And I heard this car coming down the hill from Royal Oak, and he kept getting closer and closer, and I took a look behind me, he was coming right at me, and I was on the other side of the road. So I dove in the ditch, just where Zazul live, you know. Dove in the ditch, and the car just kept going in a straight line. And never saw him again, and took me another 45 minutes to walk home.
Get out, yeah.
When I got home, everybody had gone to bed, and so next day my mom said, well, how'd the dance go? And I said, oh, it was pretty good. Sort of forgot about the attempt of my life. Wasn't much point in talking about it.
Yeah, my parents started the team club down there.
It was your parents.
Really?
Yeah, well, they were the chaperones, were they?
Yeah.
I remember that,
I was just telling Don that the only help they could get was another gentleman, Mr. Chase, who just lived down the hill from us. And he'd go down and help once in a while, but often on a Friday night, which is when they were held, if Dad wasn't able to go, my mom, who was 4'10", would go down and chaperone this whole dance by herself. But Dad would always stop in at the Saanich police station on his way into town to say that Olive was going to be at the teen dance by herself tonight, so the police made an extra little run around every once in a while.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's right.
Yes.
Well, I think it was quite an important social part.
They did that
Of our
for
lives.
about 5 years, Mom and Dad had it, but they just could not get anybody else in to help them. And then they'd go in Saturday night into town for Teen Town, where Bill and Doris Heller, who's Bill and Doris, they ran that, and Mom and Dad would go in on Saturday night and give them a hand in there. And they did that for, I don't know, 5, 6 years until it got to the point of, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your granddaughter was not walking home on Pipeline. The big end to the dance for me was walking Pat and Van Bisco home. We'd go
Charity
right
band.
to their place where they were on cherry bank. I got a kiss usually.
Well, I think you've brought back a lot of memories.
Yes, yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, so thank you.
Yes, okay. Thank you for inviting us.